Glad to be welcoming to the show the founder of the No Excuses PAC, Corbin Trent. Welcome to the coverage.
Hey, glad to be here.
Glad to have you here. So we're into it. We're slowly getting some results trickling in. The only races I've seen that have actually been called have been, the ones that weren't really contested in the first place. But right off the bat, I wanted to get your idea of on tonight, considering the states we've got, the races we've got. What are you focusing on? What are you hoping to see tonight?
So one of my biggest focuses, I think, is going to be on the Missouri Senate race, the primary there, Lucas Kuntz. I'm really excited about that race. He was running a campaign that was not just progressive, but also real focused on rebuilding the economy, job creation, on doing sort of a lot of the playbook that I'd like to see tried by the Democratic Party in places like where I'm from, like Tennessee. So it'll be really interesting for me to see if that works. I think, there's several races in Washington that I think look pretty interesting. So I think it's going to be an interesting night. But the one I'm most excited about to see is Coons. So
well, as of right now, it's looking like we've got less than 1% of the vote. Trudy Bush Valentine is up, but so little in at this point that I'm not sure how much we can really say about that. Sorry, Farron, did I hear you?
Oh, no.
Oh, I apologize.
No, sorry. I was looking at other results there. I may have made a sound. I'm sorry.
And by the way, if anything big comes up and I don't see it, feel free to let me know. We don't want to miss anything. So we were talking before we went live, and you were saying your opinion was this primary season so far hasn't necessarily been as negative as maybe the common wisdom is. What makes you say that?
Well, for one thing, I think the problem is that we've sort of been a lot of the high-profile races that we wanted to win. We haven't won, right? So there's Erica Smith or Jessica Cisneros and folks like that. But if you look down the races so far, I think there's been quite a handful of wins. Obviously, Summer Lee won a pretty surprise victory, and then you got Jamie McLeod Skinner that beat a long-term incumbent in Oregon 5, and it's not a gimme, right? That's a D+1 or something like that. It's a swing-ish seat, but she's got a real shot, I think, of winning that. And she ran on $15 minimum wage. She ran on Green New Deal-esque things. So it was a pretty big win. And you got obviously John Fetterman, who is looking like he's right now favored to win PA Senate, and not for nothing, that was a big win there. The Democratic Party went in a completely opposite direction from where they had been going, I think, in the past in some of these Northeast races. Then I think some of the most exciting races for me too are nominees that are in some pretty interesting races in Texas. Like you got Jasmine Crockett there. She's going like it's a D+27. She ran again on a very progressive platform. All the stuff that we would talk about as a movement, whether it's Green New Deal, Medicare for all, jobs, federal jobs guarantee, things like that. That's the sort of stuff she was running on. Michelle Vallejo is again it's another D+1 kind of swing seat, but she's got a good shot, and she was again running like a AOC style campaign. She's the nominee for that seat in Texas 15. Claudia Zapata, she's running against Chip Roy, I think. She's the nominee there. Greg Casar, he's going to be the next representative for Texas 35. Again, super progressive guy. Yeah. And so there's been a lot of whatever you want to, however you want to brand it, squad-like folks that are winning. I think the real question for me is how do we start getting these folks once they're in there to actually take some action and stuff. That's the squad is growing, but how do we get the squad to do more?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think about that all the time. We've got a really good strategy to elect progressives sometimes, but once they're in there, it's like this lone wolf progressive in a sea of establishment Democrats. But it's election night. We're talking about progressives winning. You mentioned a successful playbook for progressives to win. I've seen you following the Rhode Island political cooperative, and they have done some interesting things. I think they might be onto something. Have they cracked the code? We know progressive policies are very popular, but progressives aren't necessarily winning every election they run in. But do you have any learnings or takeaways from how they're running things over in Rhode Island?
Yeah, so my sort of trajectory into this world came from Bernie to brand new Congress to Justice Democrats to Ocasio's office, right? So two of the main things that I've done in the political world have been work with organizations that were founded to help elect candidates. And I feel like the Rhode Island Cooperative and another group called Renew, which is sort of an umbrella that holds, that helps, I think, 11 other states do what the cooperative is doing in Rhode Island, have absolutely learned from the wins, say, that Justice Democrats has been able to put together. But I think they've also learned from some of the mistakes. Like, for example, one of the things I think so exciting about the Rhode Island Political Cooperative is they won, I think, 6 or 7 races their first out of the gate, which is last cycle, right? Now, when one of their main founders and women that sort of leading the cooperative, Cynthia Mendez, won and was in the state senate there in Rhode Island, she didn't just say, okay, now I'm going to take what little bit of political capital I've gained, I'm going to try to get some marginal things done on some bills, I'm going to then spend all that capital and start trying to work with all the Democrats here in Rhode Island, even though they're worse than Manchin-esque Democrats. No, instead, she doubled down, kept recruiting, going to work every day in the Senate, and openly recruiting people to run against her colleagues. And I think, having somebody like that as part of your team and part of the slate is such a valuable asset, for one thing. The other thing they've done is they've been able to structure their cooperative to provide resources like campaign coordinators or campaign managers. They've got a whole campaign manager program, 30 some odd candidates running in that slate together. And I think the other thing that they've got that makes it different and more exciting in my mind is that they've got the executive level. They got top of the ticket too. So they've got Matt Brown running for governor, Cynthia Mendez running for lieutenant governor, and then these state house and state senate races, right? So what they're putting together is actually a governing majority if they're able to win for Rhode Island. I think they've definitely got some of the secret sauce. So.
I want to talk to you about some of the races that you brought up earlier. We have more progressives getting elected, even as you pointed out in this race. Some who are in districts where they're definitely getting in, but they're going to be joining the House, a House that might at that point flip to the Republicans. But even if it doesn't, they can pass some good bills, but it's the Senate where things lately have gone to die. We haven't really had sort of like a squad breakout into the Senate yet. We really haven't had, it's great to have, awesome questions from Katie Porter on the House side, but on the Senate side, you've got, Bernie Sanders and a couple of others who are okay, and that's pretty much it. And so much seems to hinge on the future of the Senate. Why have progressives had so much more trouble breaking through there? Do you see Fetterman as sort of maybe a path that others could walk, or is that he's such a unique guy? Is that going to be hard to duplicate? What are your thoughts about progressives on the Senate side?
Well, I think it's expensive for one thing, right? So that's one of the reasons it's just as far, we're talking elections here. I think one of the strategies that I've seen go the other way is in Michigan, you had someone running for governor, Dr. Abdul
El-Sayed?
I don't remember. Pardon?
Abdul El-Sayed?
Abdul El-Sayed. He was running for governor, right? He raised a ton of money, very progressive campaign, and I think he lost ultimately, right? But what he ended up doing is helping elect Rashida Tlaib and a handful of other folks at a state municipal level, and then even at a federal level, like with Rashida. So I think if you're gonna, these Senate races are so daggone expensive, right? I mean, you're going to see people spending, tens of millions of dollars per cycle in these races, and candidates basically on the progressive side, we've not really been able to match dollar for dollar. Like, you see some of these PACs now, like Justice Democrats has a PAC. There's a handful of other progressive PACs that are out there spending money, and they're able to be competitive with, say, an APAC and these other campaigns. Like we talked about Summer Lee earlier, and she won by a really slim margin. We were also talking about that race in Texas 15, Michelle Vallejo. She won by 30 votes, right? Yeah. So when you get those kind of margins where they're really, really tight, if somebody's outspending you 10-1, you're done. Right. And you don't have right now, what I'd like to see if we're going to be competitive in Senate races is something like, a big super PAC, God forbid, I know that's a terrible word to use, put together by the likes of, say, Bernie Sanders or AOC, somebody that's got the capacity to raise hundreds of millions of dollars in a cycle, and then you can be competitive. There comes a point where I think money just overwhelms the way in which progressives can organize. And right now we've got a couple of tools at our disposal. It's some amount of fundraising that we've built on small R donors. We've got the capacity to sort of activate and engage volunteers and that sort of thing. And then we've got the sort of Cinderella stories that we get to tell, which captures the imagination of the media and the press, and then kind of use that press narrative to help raise awareness. But that, I don't think that's enough to win some of these Senate races. So you've got people like Fetterman that are just sort of these characters, these larger-than-life characters, I think is definitely one of the recipes that helped overcome that money. But he, ended up spending, millions and millions of dollars too. So he was able to raise that money and not be so distasteful to the donor groups too. So.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you one more question. There's been some indication, I've seen some op-eds starting to be written about this, about a change in the polling, that some of these races that it seemed like were definitely going to the right aren't necessarily going to. Some are saying the Senate might still be held on to, even if not the House. If that is true, I know you've been watching what's been developing. To what extent do you think this is being influenced by the actual communication strategy of the Democrats, the actual actions of the Democrats, their actual achievements, versus just things they don't really have any control over, like Roe v. Wade being destroyed, or gas prices inching down over time?
I've really not been terribly impressed by the messaging coming out of the Democratic Party, by and large. I think they did. They didn't do as bad a job as I was afraid they were going to do with January 6th. And that just sort of took over the cycle. The whole committee did for quite a while. I think obviously the gas prices easing up I think it's been more things out of their control probably. And I think it's also the Republicans, for whatever reason, who have generally been sort of, they've been sort of very mission driven and stayed on their message for a long time, are kind of starting to crack. You've got these elements of the Republican Party that are sort of at war with one another, where you've got your sort of Matt Gaetz and those folks that are kind of going a little nuts, and then you've got your Mitch McConnells, and there's this sort of, there's not a lockstep message right now coming out of the Republican Party. And I think that's one of the things that made Trump so strong, is that his message was simple, understandable, and it became the message of the party. And right now, the party doesn't really seem to have a message except for, Joe Biden's senile and gas prices bad. So I just don't. I think it's a failure of the Republican message too. And they're just no fun lately, right? They don't want us to, have any sex. They don't want us to read books. They want to set on fire. The Republican Party is becoming so unfun. I think that they're just less and less attractive.
Can't deny that.
Yeah.
You have one more question?
Yeah, one more question. I agree. There needs to be more fun in politics. We're doing our best, but I really liked your point about Tennessee, wanting to see some shifts about how progressives operate in the South. And we're in LA now, but I came here from North Carolina and I love the South. There are so many great people in the South, and it feels like there's kind of a common theme of writing people in the South off as this isn't a place where progressives can win. But there are a lot of people that are aligned with our values and policies that I think just get written off because they've kind of been gerrymandered out of having a meaningful vote. But I don't think it's strategic to forget about the South, right? There are a lot of people there who are crying out, who are quite upset about the rural left behind, the lack of rural broadband, flooding on farmland really hurting farming. There are a lot of issues that I think progressives can make a meaningful case that we have the right answers and some solutions there. So I'm just curious, what your thoughts are for how progressives should change their strategy about organizing in the South.
Well, I think, one of the things I wanted to see more of when Bernie Sanders was running both times is more organizing in the South. It's something that's tough, right? Especially in Democratic primaries for a candidate like Bernie, because most of the Southern, a lot of the Southern electorate's made up of African Americans in the Democratic primaries, and Bernie wasn't going to do well there for whatever reason. He wasn't connecting with that base. But I think a lot of people have preconceived notions about the South that, at least, I haven't, I disagree with. There was Al Gore was from Tennessee. Back when Obama was running for office, there's 9 representatives from Tennessee. And of those 9, 5 of them were Democrats. And we're about to probably end up with 1 Democrat left. Now, a lot of that, as you mentioned, is gerrymandering. But the other part of that is the Democratic Party becoming sort of the party of the elite. And while the Republicans shifted to be the racist party of the working class. So you've had these sort of transitions. But you've got a lot of people that felt like they were sort of treated as little chips and left out in the cold. And I think that what progressives need to show is that they're connecting, they're hearing them. Like when I was on the campaign with Bernie, I'd go to West Virginia, I'd go and there was a lot of excitement for those folks. I'm from a little town called Morristown in Tennessee, and again, there was just tons of excitement for Bernie in that little East Tennessee town. More than I'd seen for any other candidate. And I think that what we've got to do is not write off things that are long shots and try to do some of the long work. But the other thing is the element that we're missing, and I hope that we're going to be able to do this with the IRA, this the Reduction Act that we're pushing through here. Hopefully that goes through. I think one of the things that Southerners and voters across the country have come to the conclusion of is that the government's not functional, right? That it's not possible. When I was pushing the Green New Deal, we used to talk about, hey, we're talking about like the moonshot, like we did with NASA, or we're talking about the Manhattan Project, or like the Intercontinental Rail System, or the Interstate Superhighway, whatever it is, this kind of big vision. And any of those examples, one of the pushbacks was, well, we couldn't do that now, right? There's this sort of like this general consensus that the government is incapable of being functional, incapable of doing big things. And I think that's that's one of the things I'm excited, like you were talking earlier, John, about this Rhode Island cooperative. I think when you get these bigger groups, these bigger slates that have a singular vision and say, hey, this is what we want to do, this is the way we want to transform the economy, this is the way we want to transform the state or the country, and they can articulate that vision. And I think that's going to be something that helps us inspire voters that we've lost as a party, so hopefully.
You made a lot of great points. I wish we had about 3 more hours with you. We do have 3 more hours, but unfortunately not with you, Corbin, Trent. But great conversation. Hope to break down more of this with you in the near future. But thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.